Hello everyone! As a heads up, this episode has been divided into 2 parts. You are now listening to part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, please go back and do so before continuing forward. We hope you enjoy. So then he gets the serum, and it's this big dramatic scene, and he comes out of the machine looking so good.
Oh my gosh. He goes with a little skinny guy, and then I have never seen more defined pecs in my life. Seriously. Oh my heaven. You're like, are you a golden
all,
god,
like,
actually? Yeah.
Because he's all sweaty.
They make him all
Like,
glistening. You're like,
I did not need that. And then like,
I love Peggy.
Like,
she's like,
almost touches his stomach, and is like, anyway,
yeah,
you look taller.
Okay. You're taller.
Yeah, that scene, probably like the biggest, for lack of a better term, thirst trap in the whole Marvel universe.
Forgive us if that's offensive.
I know. Sorry if that's
but you know they did it on purpose.
True.
I'm like, imagine I'm watching it, I'm like, imagine being Chris Evans and being like, yeah, I actually just have a body that Marvel decided to portray as a superhuman super soldier. Like, I just got injected with a serum to be a super soldier, and I just like, I'm just that guy. Like, I just actually look like that.
Damn. I mean, I'm sure he put a lot of work to it.
I mean, yes. Not like, yeah, I don't want to
still
unvalidate like any effort he put in, but like he put in the work,
he's a
and
human
he got
person.
it.
He is not a super soldier.
He did not get injected with a serum. He worked out a lot, and it paid off.
Yes.
Anyway,
good moment.
Here we are. You're listening to a female podcast.
I was gonna say 2 young adult women hosting this had to make comments.
We couldn't not think about it.
That had to be said. Right after the serum is taken, there's a spy from Hydra in the wings, and he ends up blowing up part of the building and shooting the doctor, taking the last bit of the serum and running out. And so Steve chases him down, and long story short, he catches up to him, gets him, but then the man takes a cyanide tablet that kills him so that he can't give anything away. And so that's been our experience. The doctor's dead, and the serum's gone. It broke.
Right.
So
Spilled.
Now it's gone, it's been shattered, and the doctor's dead, and he was the only one who knew everything that was in it. Yeah. So they have no idea how to replicate it.
Steve's it.
Steve is all they have, and the general's not happy about it, to be quite frank. He's very upset about it. And so Steve is basically given the choice to either be a lab rat and be tested on so they can try to figure out what was in the serum, even though they don't even have a lot of hope that will really bring them answers.
Yeah. They established that it would probably take years, even if they do that.
Exactly. So they don't have a lot of hope with that. Or he can be part of the U.S. propaganda to sell bonds. So he goes for that.
Woohoo!
Try to save the country that way.
Yeah.
And
can I cut in? One thing that I did think was interesting right here is that he takes quite literally no time to adjust to his new capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of thinking about that. I was like, I was on the border of being annoyed by it. Then I was like, okay, no, think it through. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think it's super interesting because we talked about how he was already that guy, mm-hmm. And so it's weird to see somebody go through such an ordeal. He's screaming and obviously in pain and looks dead when they open it up, right? His body is great, but his face is I just went through a traumatic experience. Yeah. And he's not okay. And then a bomb goes off and then he just starts running after mm-hmm. this guy. He has not tested anything, right? No, he takes off running, he's running down, catches up with this car, he's jumping over things, he dives into the water and punches through this submarine window, like he doesn't know any of his limitations or capabilities, but he just goes for it and uses them to perfection, mm-hmm. right? And I was like, it gives me this sense of he was always ready for that. He's been in all of these fights and he's never fought back because he hasn't been able to, but like I mentioned earlier, he does all that he can do. And it's now that he's here, he's doing exactly what he's been doing this entire time like his body is just now responding to more of it. Does that make any sense?
He's more capable now physically
more capable
things that he already was willing to
do. He was already ready to do. Yeah. And I just thought that was such an interesting idea, that he just took no adjustment time, because he was just there. He was just already there mentally and spiritually. He was just prepared, and so his body just responded, and it's like he could just feel what those capabilities were, because he's always been aware of his capabilities and his limitations, and he's always done everything that he can do, and now he's just continuing that in a new body, and so he just like gets it and clicks with it so fast. And I just thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah. And I think connecting to the gospel principle, we're talking about belief in your knowledge. Like, he knows the doctor, and he knows that he's really smart. He probably does not understand all the science.
He doesn't get what's going on.
He does not at all. But he knows the doctor and knows that he's worked hard on this, that he's tried to use it before, and not the greatest things have happened. And he knows that the doctor has sought to perfect it. And he also knows that the doctor respects him enough not to have given him the serum unless he knew that it was most likely going to work.
Right.
Like, obviously it still needed to be tested. They don't know for sure. But he really trusted and knew a lot about the doctor. And he knew that what the serum was meant to do, that it was meant to make him faster and stronger. And so he's using that knowledge. And instead of being like, ooh, I don't know, I guess we'll see if it does, he's just like, I know this is what it's supposed to do, so I'm just gonna trust that and go for it.
Yeah.
And just trust that I actually have the capabilities that I was promised.
Yeah.
Which is very insightful for us with our relationship with God. Like, do we in those moments believe in God, as in we know him, we know that he's perfect, we know that he's going to give us the gifts and things we need to accomplish what he's asking us to do, and we just gotta run with it? Like, we just gotta go and just trust that what God has given us is enough. I think too often we hesitate and we're like, well, I mean, yeah, but is it really enough?
Right.
Like, I don't know.
We know that God is there and God will help us, but we don't quite believe it. We don't trust it.
Like, we don't trust it enough to where we can just go with it the way Steve just runs.
Yeah.
And I think there's a power in thinking about whether your relationship with God is in a place where you can just run with it. And if it's not, that's okay.
Yeah.
But that is something you may want to be working on.
Look at,
and try. And maybe in some contexts, you are there with him. Like, maybe in some situations, you're like, yes, I can run with what he's given me. I can trust that he's given me the tools I need. But in others, you can't. And that's where you need to work on it. So just something to think about with that.
For sure. That reminds me a little bit of a BYU devotional that I read from 2019 by Lawrence E. Corbridge, who's a General Authority 70. And he talks about, it fits in perfectly right here, but I'm going to have to cast forward a little bit. Okay. He's talking about kind of the knowledge that we have, right? And he quotes Joseph Smith saying that knowledge is necessary to life and godliness. Knowledge is revelation. Knowledge is the power of God unto salvation, right? So just this important of like knowledge and knowing. Brother Corbridge continues to say, it's kind of a long quote, so I won't quote the whole thing. I'll skip around a little bit. But he says, people say you should be true to your beliefs. While that is true, you cannot be better than what you know. Most of us act based on our beliefs, especially what we believe to be in our self-interest. The problem is we're sometimes wrong. And I don't want to apply this to Steve. I want to apply this to some other characters, actually. Okay. You have the general who kind of undermines Steve a lot, right? Yeah. He doesn't trust the doctor, and he doesn't trust Steve and these capabilities. And then we also have our bad guy who we haven't even really talked about yet, who is Red Skull, and he is the one who also has an earlier version of the super soldier serum, right? And he also really acts on what he believes, kind of in an interesting way. Like he does what he thinks is right. But I want to kind of think about like this idea of acting what we believe, but being wrong. He gives some examples. Some may believe in God and that pornography is wrong and yet still click on a site wrongly believing that he will be happier if he does, or he can't help but not click on it, or it isn't hurting anyone, or is not that bad. He's just wrong. Someone may believe and even know that Jesus is the Christ and still deny him not once but 3 times because of the mistaken belief that he would be better off appeasing the crowd. Peter wasn't evil. I'm not even sure he was weak. He was just wrong. Oh, and then one other good one. When you act badly, you may think you are bad when in truth you're usually mistaken. You are just wrong. The challenge is not so much closing the gap between our actions and our beliefs. Rather, the challenge is closing the gap between our beliefs and the truth. That is the challenge. So that's something that I think Steve is really good at. Mm-hmm. And we have some other characters who aren't as good at recognizing the gap between their beliefs and truth. And I thought that was really cool. And he continues on to talk about the way that we gain knowledge. And he talks about 4 different ways that we gain knowledge. And the 2 that stood out to me for our context were scientific and divine. And so I think you have somebody like the scientist. I think he's very scientific based, obviously, right? And he still has a good heart. He notices Steve and he recognizes his good qualities, but I think he's kind of this like middle ground where he's scientific based and like has this knowledge of divine knowledge, right? And uses that to find Steve. And then we have our bad guy, Red Skull, who at the very beginning when he finds the Tesseract, right? He says to that guy in the church you mentioned, he says, what others believe to be superstition, you and I know to be science. And then he says later on to somebody's like, are you going to save the world with magic or whatever? And he's like, it's science, but I understand your confusion. And so he's just very like this science worldly knowledge focused. And he has this knowledge and he uses these scientific means to discover this knowledge. And so then there's this gap between his knowledge and his belief and what's right and wrong, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you have Steve. We mentioned that he doesn't really have the scientific knowledge. He's intelligent, sure, but like he doesn't know what's going on with this serum, and he's not a scholar. He's not a scientist. He's just a guy, you know. But he has the ability to acquire divine knowledge, right? Brother Corbridge does mention that, like, ideally you can combine multiple types of these. But I think Steve does use intelligence and you know, inquiry and analysis and things like that to assess situations. Oh, for sure. But ultimately, like, the best way to divine truth and what's right is through divine knowledge. And I think he gets what he knows to be right from a higher source rather than anything that he can learn in a laboratory. And I think that really differentiates him from some of these other characters who are just focused on, you know, the general, I would say probably uses analysis most of the time. And he's not, there's a gap there and he doesn't recognize that Steve is right and that Steve can be doing more than what he's putting him to. And this, our Red Skull bad guy character doesn't recognize that what he's doing is evil. Yes. And Steve is the one who knows what's right because it comes from a higher power, somebody, you know, the ultimate power. Anyway, so I thought that was a cool talk about knowledge and how we gain it. And that felt like where it fit in. So, so there's my gaining knowledge tangent.
Yes, I appreciate that. In fact, building off of that, it's interesting kind of jumping forward a little bit again in our Marvel universe. There's this really great line in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 that happens. Wow. No spoilers for that one since it is a newer one.
It is newer, but
so I won't give the context for this because that would be a spoiler. But basically there's a lot about creation in that movie. And there's this line where it's like, there's the hands that made us and the hands that guide the hands. And I think that Johann Schmidt, Red Skull, looks to these hands, the doctor's hands, to his own hands of like, I discovered this and I did this for myself and it's amazing and it's a miracle. And he really puts all his focus on himself as a scientist, being a creator, being a discoverer of things and forcing things to happen, whereas Steve looks higher than that. He looks at the hands that guide the hands. He's looking at the hands that drove the doctor to choose him in the first place, and that's beyond what we can logically understand in this world, which serves him very well throughout all of his experience. But I think, having that perspective of the highest power really helps you to gain that divine knowledge more than seeking for your own personal, either just looking towards yourself or looking to very temporal things. So on this propaganda trip, he ends up on the front lines talking to some members of the army, and it doesn't really go very well, and Peggy shows up, and basically he's informed that the 107th was attacked by Hydra, and most of them were killed or taken captive, and there was just a few left, and that is the division that Bucky was part of. And so he's like, oh my gosh. So he goes and asks the general, do you know James Buchanan Barnes? I was going to say Bucky Barnes. I'm like, no, I wouldn't say that. James Buchanan Barnes, do you know anything about him? And the general's like, I've written a lot of letters, but I do recognize the name. I'm sorry. Like, he's probably gone. And Steve's like, no, that's not good enough. And the general's like, no, I don't want you anywhere near this. Like, just accept that he's dead and move on. And Steve won't, because he's a principled man and he will do what he feels is right. So he goes and saves them. Long story short, he just does it. So
he gets Peggy and Howard Stark's help.
Yes.
Flies into enemy territory and gets him out.
And he meets Red Skull face to face.
Yes.
There's that part, and we get to see Red Skull's actual face.
His Red Skull.
So it's kind of a big dramatic moment as far as an action movie goes, for sure. It's a climactic moment. And then it cuts to, like, the general and Peggy being there, and the general's, like, writing a letter to the Secretary of Defense, I assume, or someone else like that.
Somebody.
Who he informs that Steve was killed in action, basically, that he assumes that because they haven't heard any word from him still. And then Steve comes walking up with all of these men that he saved, just right into camp. And I love that his first comment is, I'm here to submit myself for disciplinary action. Like, he respects the rules.
Yeah.
He just is like, it was more important for me to not follow them right now. Right. But, like, I know the rules are there and I will submit myself to that now.
He's not trying to get out of it.
Yes,
He's going to do what he thinks is right.
He took responsibility.
But
he's a choice and accountability person, for sure. But he also just prioritizes what he really feels is right over what the rules say, which in some ways is impressive. It's kind of like a living the higher law kind of a feel to it.
Yeah. That you can argue it both ways, of course, in terms of principle.
It all depends on the context. Like, there's always moments where something like that he could be choosing wrong. Like, he's not infallible, but
right. And it depends on your own values a little bit, I think, too, because some people are just going to value rules and laws more than others. And I think he does value them, but not to the highest degree. But I don't know. Then we also have the commandment to obey the laws of the land. So, like, I wouldn't blame somebody for saying, no, you should obey the laws. I can see it going either way. Not saying he did anything wrong. I just... there's just an interesting debate there with values and principles and
for sure. For sure. But in the long run, he is a choice and accountability person.
Yes.
So that is very good quality.
He takes responsibility, and that's beautiful. And he saves 400 men. So awesome.
So all good stuff. And the general, I love that the general is the type of person to be like, okay, fair enough. Kind of that slightly, like, higher law kind of living of, like, he's like, you're right. This was a rule, but I also recognize that what you did was more beneficial than following the rule would have been.
He respects the fact that he saved his men, and he's like, all right. And I think it's also, it's a knowledge-earning moment for him, right? I kind of mentioned that analysis, right? That was one of the 4 types of knowledge gaining in that talk. He doesn't trust or believe in Steve because he hasn't proven himself, which is true. Like he has no reason to trust this guy, honestly. He performed terribly in training. Like, okay, now he looks buff. Like, that doesn't mean he's a good soldier. That doesn't mean he knows how to fight. It doesn't mean he's good at anything. And so we have this very analytical person who's like trying to save lives and win a war. Like, he's got heavy things on his plate. But once he sees Steve prove himself and sees that he is a valuable asset and can save his men and is fighting for the same goals that he is and is capable of achieving them, I think he kind of like, he analyzes the situation and says, okay, we're on the same page now. We're good. He just doesn't, he doesn't have that, that higher knowledge, that divine knowledge, that ability to just recognize like the spirit and see that the way that the doctor did. In a way, he doesn't just innately trust him. Yes. But he does learn. He's capable of learning and recognizing the truth.
Yes. He just had to learn a different way.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. And then after this, like, Steve, I mean, he already was believing in himself and his own abilities, but he also begins to believe in himself as a leader. And there's this scene where the general's, like, basically having Steve become officially Captain America and lead a team for like special operations within the war. And so he tells him, we're already starting to put a team of the best men together. And Steve's like, all due respect, I am too. Like, he's like, I trust my ability to read people and to know where they'd fit in my plans. And I've already worked with these men and seen that they could do it and that they can follow my orders as well. And so he uses several men from the 107th that he saved who particularly impressed him, and they end up doing a lot of good things throughout their little montage
of taking down Hydra.
Yes. Winning the war for them from the background. So it's super interesting to see like him grow into more of a leader. Like, he already had a lot of those qualities, but now he's gaining confidence in his ability to be a leader. Right. And to do what needs to be done with the help of other people. And that's where I would say, I think it's easy to say that he's arrogant, and I think in some ways he is, but I think arrogance has a connotation of looking down on other people. Yeah. And I really don't think he does. That you wouldn't give to him. No. Yeah. Like, he definitely sees the others as his equals. He just recognizes he is a leader and he needs to be a leader.
I mean, you have to have leaders create organization. Leaders are the reason that a group functions. So, I mean, it's kind of like, it's a logical fallacy to argue that one is arrogant simply because they believe in their ability to lead a group, because it's a necessary role, and he just recognizes that he has the qualities to fulfill that role.
He knows that he is the best man for the job, basically, and he sticks by that. But he also is a good reader of other people. Like, I like that we see that, yes, he's very confident in himself, but he also is able to look outside of himself and be like, I see this person and they have this skill and this person has this skill and I'm impressed by this, and he's able to use that. So it's not just the self-confidence, it's also an understanding of those around him and of how to utilize other people's skills to accomplish a task.
For sure.
I think most of the rest of the movie will probably just speed run through. I guess the biggest thing is Bucky dies, and it's really upsetting. Well, he thinks he dies.
He thinks he dies.
We discover in the next Captain America movie that he didn't, but
he falls from a really high ledge. It's a fair assumption.
A train, yes. A train. He falls off a moving train that's very high up.
It's
in the
the rule of almost all movies, but particularly Marvel ones, that if you don't see someone die, they're not
no
dead.
Body, no crime. And if it's Loki, even if there is a body,
it's true.
He might not be dead.
Yep. Loki is a complete exception to where he simply doesn't die.
Yes, he's always there. Always there.
Yep. Always Loki.
Yes, so that is the case with Bucky. But anyway, in the moment, Steve thinks he dies, and it's really painful, obviously, for him, his best friend, like a brother to him. So that's a really sad moment. And then he kind of gets that extra push to, like, want to take down Hydra and make sure they know what's going on. They also capture a scientist that the Red Skull was using as kind of his assistant through everything, who was one of his, like, his right-hand man, really close relationship there, and he just gives up a lot of information because he doesn't want to die. He cares more about himself than he does about Hydra.
Yes, hardcore self-preservation.
Which you see a lot, yes.
Yeah, I think you can see it earlier too, honestly, when he's obviously uncomfortable with some of Red Skull's ruthlessness, but he's still just right on board. He's like, yeah, Hail Hydra, man. Like, he's very self-preservation focused.
Yes. Yeah, that is his whole thing. So we're able to see that a little bit more. And then we get to the final fight scene. So it's on a plane. That's very important to remember because it does come into play. And Red Skull is intending to drop bombs on all the biggest cities in the world. He wants to take over the world. And to do that, he's going to destroy the power hubs. And so one of them's going to go to New York, which is Steve's home. So that's particularly sensitive for him. So they have this big fight. Red Skull ends up picking up the Tesseract directly with his hand, and that ends up doing something to him, which we don't really know what that is at this point. We find out later he got sent to another planet to be cursed, basically, but he disappears, flies up into the universe, and drops the Tesseract, and it just kind of falls, it like melts through the bottom of the ship and falls into the ocean. So that's the fate of the Tesseract at this point. Backtracking a little bit, something I forgot to mention that I did take note of just briefly is when the Red Skull realizes how tough Steve is when he says, "You don't give up, do you?" Like, he's like...
And Cap has a repeat of his first line.
Nope.
Yeah. That is the exact thing I had a note on as well.
It's very just no ifs or buts about it. He's a very like, nope. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep doing what I feel is right, no matter what. Which I do like that callback. It's a really nice moment.
Yes. Nope. Yeah. No, I love the fact that it helps us remember that, like, he'll take any punch and he'll do whatever he needs to, right? But I think it's also cool that I think it connects to this old incompetent Steve that we know and this new powerful Steve that we know, right? Because we have this, like, he'll take all the hits and he doesn't care and he'll keep getting back up. But then he also is aware of the fact that he's the only one who can complete this mission, right? Nobody else can go up against Red Skull. He's the one who has to do it, and the mission has to be completed, and so he's gonna do it. And nothing else matters. He's going to give it everything he has, and he's going to do it because that self-awareness of his own qualities and that positively used pride, he's the one who can finish this fight and no one else. And so he'll do it.
And I love too, I thought about this while watching the movie too. I thought back, after his best friend dies and everything, and he could just like want revenge against Red Skull. And that could be his driving force, but it's not. You don't have that feeling. Like, I thought back to Peter Parker in the third Spider-Man film, where he gets to a point where he wants revenge because of the death of his loved one. And even like, you kind of think, oh, maybe he got over it. And then he like comes back to it when he's in the middle of the fight. He's like, I just want to kill you myself, to this bad guy. And so we see that kind of idea of it would be so easy to seek revenge and have that be a driving force behind your final fight scene of the movie, so to speak. But the fact that it's not for Steve, again, shows his leadership and good man qualities, I guess. Like, just shows where his heart really is.
He knows what's important.
His heart is always in the right place. And
he's angry, but it's not controlling him.
Exactly. Like, it doesn't cause him to lose sight of what's really important in the moment. And that does good as well when he does have to make the sacrifice that he does, where he ends up just driving the plane into the ice, into the water, in order to just stop it from going and murdering millions and
New York,
billions of people. Yes, exactly.
What I kind of had that under like the same note. It's like the same idea of like he's the one who can complete the mission. Nobody else is on the plane. He's the one who can do it, and so he doesn't hesitate. He doesn't complain. He doesn't argue. He tells Peggy, "I have to put it in the water."
Yes.
And then he does. Like, there's nothing, there's no bad attitude, there's no why me? You know, the only why me he asks is when something good happens to him, right?
Yes.
There's no why me, there's no hesitation, there's no arguing about it. This is the right thing to do, and he's the one who can do it, so he does it.
Yes.
And it's just awesome. It's a beautiful, like, you know, it's this like final summary of like everything that he is and has become.
Yeah. And I love it because, yeah, it would be so easy to make him such a two-dimensional character where you're like, oh, he's just good and that's just who he is and he's just going to do the right thing. But I think kudos to Chris Evans that he's able to show this so well, that side of him where it's hard. These decisions are hard for him. Like, it's not just like, okay, whatever. Like, he makes a decision solidly and fast, but you can see in his eyes and hear like that tremor in his words that he's scared.
He's scared, yes.
And that he doesn't necessarily want to do this, but he knows it's what needs to be done. And so he doesn't doubt and he doesn't waver in that decision, but you can tell that it's not easy. Yeah. And I love how well, Chris Evans does as an actor with that, and then just the movie makers in general showing that. And then we get that heartbreaking scene where he is talking to Peggy and she like comes up with these other ideas. She's like, no, we could do this. I could talk to someone else about this. And he's like, no, like he just knows. He hangs on to the facts that he knows. He's like, yes, that all sounds good, but we don't have time. Yeah. Like, you're right. Maybe we could do that, but we can't guarantee it. And any wasted time is going to kill people if we're wrong.
It's that leadership quality of making a decision, like you were talking about with Mistborn. That, that ability to just say no. He listens to her advice and says, no. I made my decision, and it's what's happening. What needs
to happen.
It's hard for me, but it's what's going to save people.
Yeah, and then instead of dwelling on it, he takes the time to make it better for him and for her. Yeah. Which I love, too. Like, he's like, this is the decision I've made. This is what I have to do. And then he changes the subject because he's like, there's no point in arguing about it, and I don't want my last moments here and with her to be just us arguing about what to do to save my life when I know it's pointless. And so I love that he is like, I might need to do a rain check on that dance. It's so upsetting.
Literally kill me. I can't even.
Just the cuteness and like the respect for her too, of like, I know this is painful for her and it is for me too, so let's just push aside those frustrated and nervous feelings and just have a moment. Because that's all we can do right now. The only thing worth doing right now. So he does. And that's it. He died. Just kidding. He didn't. No body, no crime.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
Anyway, like I said, at the beginning, we only see his shield. We don't even see his frozen body in the ice.
No body.
Anyway, so, yes, we see they do look for him. Howard Stark is looking all over for him. He does find the Tesseract, which starts off Avengers in the future, but they keep looking, Peggy keeps looking, and then we flash and it's Steve opening his eyes, and he's in this hospital room, and is being cared for, and then there's this game playing, and this woman comes in who seems like a nurse and is like, how are you doing, whatever, and he clearly looks like stressed out and something's wrong. And it's interesting because even as the viewer, like, it lingers on that moment for long enough that you can tell that his attitude is not just, whoa, I didn't think I would live or anything. Like, because if it was that, it would have passed. Like, he would have been like, okay, I guess I'm here.
Somehow I survived.
Or like asked where Peggy was or something. But like, it's like this drawn out, like, he looks afraid.
You can tell there's something
he's like
off.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
He's like, something's wrong. And then he mentions he was at the game that was playing on the radio, which they didn't have recorded things back then in that way that would be just like replaying on the radio like that. So he's like, this is weird. Like, what is going on? And so yes, he busts out. Apparently he was in S.H.I.E.L.D. That's what he discovers. And he was asleep for so many years. We meet Nick Fury shows up, and he lets him know, we just wanted to break it to you slowly. Sorry about that. And breaks the news to him that he's been asleep for so many years. Basically, everybody he knew is dead or very, very old, and the world has changed a lot. And that's how it ends, with him just in the modern day.
Bam.
And he's lost
and the heartbreaking line.
And... Oh, yes.
I had a date.
I had a date. Oh,
that's the thing
gosh.
he's thinking about.
I know.
He just walked into Times Square looking like modern day Times Square.
Yes.
And he's like, oh no, I was supposed to go dancing with Peggy.
Yes. That's what he's concerned about. That's why he's so perfect. Oh my gosh. Anyway.
Do we have a rival to Kristoff?
Maybe.
Perfect man rival.
I had a date. What do you need?
What do you need?
Quotes. These are the quotes of perfect men. I had a date. And
what do you need?
We gotta come up with a list as we go through.
Yes. Quotes of devotion by perfect men.
Of devotion.
I'm starting it right now.
I love that. Love that for us. And then at the end of the year, we can just revisit and just go through them.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Love it.
Okay.
Anyway, yes. Basically, to sum up, Steve knew what he was about, and he trusted in that.
Yes.
And we should be seeking to do that too. God gave us gifts. We've been told that over and over again. Spiritual gifts. He gives us all the tools we need to accomplish what we need to on this earth. So trust it and just go for it, even if it seems scary. And it's okay to be scared. Like, Steve definitely, like I said, he clearly is nervous and doubts at times, but he recognizes the need to just be like, no, I just gotta go for it, because me sitting here worrying about it or being doubtful about it is not going to make any sort of impact that I want to make.
Right.
And it takes a lot to train yourself to think that way. I definitely am not there at all. The amount of time I've spent just like being uncertain about what God wants from me, and like being uncertain as to whether he would help me accomplish certain things. I have things going on right in my head right now where I'm like, I don't think I can handle this. I don't think I can do this. And God's like, yeah, he's like, I am God, and I made it so you can. If I'm asking you to do it, it's because I know the right thing will come out of it. And sometimes it may fail, but that doesn't mean it was a complete failure. You know what I'm saying?
Girl, you are like quoting Come Follow Me right now for this week. This is I will go and do.
Oh, true that. Yes.
I just taught that lesson today, so that's why.
On your mind.
Yeah. First Nephi 3 is we talk a ton about how, Nephi and his brothers go to get the plates twice. And it fails. They've been commanded to go and get these plates, and they try twice, and it just keeps failing. And nothing's working, and nobody knows what to do, and there's not another option, but God prepares a way. And that's the lesson, right? That's what Nephi teaches us in verse 7. Like, I will go and do, because I know that when he commands us to do something, he prepares a way for us to do it.
Yes. Amen. I think that's just a great way to wrap up.
Awesome.
Why keep rambling when you've got Nephi backing up your words?
If Nephi says it, man. Mic drop. Okay.
Good stuff. All right. Well, that is everything from us today. Thank you so much for watching, listening. Be sure to subscribe, leave a 5-star review according to wherever you are participating in our podcast. Also follow us on Instagram at God in All Things. We do a variety of posts over there, maybe not as regularly as we'd like to, but
sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
It's somewhat regular.
Yes. You'll at least see the updates for new episodes and everything on there, and it's a lot of fun when we do post, and you can get hints for upcoming episodes, which is kind of fun too, so definitely follow us there. Also follow me on YouTube, my other channel, Good Strong Words. I chat about just what I'm reading in general on there, and it's a good old time. And that is a wrap. So like we said, thank you for watching and listening. Keep remembering to see God in all things, and we will see you next time. Bye!
Bye!